Historically speaking, the greatest armies in the world have always had a strictly no-sex policy. But did you know that even in the fictional world of Game of Thrones, the two most important, most powerful armies were also forbidden from having sex? As someone who has watched the Game of Thrones series over and over again, I spent months trying to understand why the sexless lives of the Unsullied and the Night's Watch may or may not have made them the most powerful and most revered army in the whole of Westeros. Hello everyone, my name is Celibacy and this is 𝗧𝗵𝗶𝗀, my commentary on important life themes that appear in film and in literature. Alright, let's get into it without wasting much time. So for those who don't know, the Unsullied were eunuch slave soldiers, which means that they were castrated. Their penises and their testicles were chopped off entirely. So these slave boys enter training from a young age of 5 and they train from dawn till dusk. Their training is brutal and it is designed to strip them of their self, of their individuality, of any empathy that they may have. If at any point in time any recruit fails any aspect of their training, they are killed immediately. So statistically speaking, only a third of the boys that enter at 5 years old to train to become Unsullied survive to truly become Unsullied. But in the end, when all is said and done, the group of men who have been trained and honed into a machine of lethal moving parts emerge as the ultimate Unsullied. A rather curious name for a group of eunuch soldiers, a name that is suggesting some kind of purity. I'm not quite sure why the name Unsullied for an army group, but we'll get into that very soon. Alright, but before that, come with me to the city of Astapor, to the very first time that Daenerys Targaryen meets a man called 𝗪𝗲𝗪𝗀𝗪𝗀 to negotiate terms for the release of the Unsullied to join Daenerys' army. And let's take a look at a few of the quotes that 𝗪𝗲𝗪𝗀𝗪𝗀 gives whilst giving a presentation to Daenerys Targaryen about the strengths of the Unsullied, which becomes their selling point at that moment. So 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗪𝗀 says to Daenerys Targaryen, the Unsullied have something better than strength. They have discipline. They are the lockstep legions of old 𝗧𝗍𝗫, absolutely obedient, absolutely loyal, and utterly without fear. Slave swordsmen can be had for less than the price of their swords, but Unsullied are the finest foot in all the world. Each represents many years of training. They are like Valyrian steel, folded over and over and hammered for years on end until they are stronger and more resilient than any metal on earth. So this is just a few quotes from 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪 demonstrating the strengths of the Unsullied and the rigor of their training. Now the Night's Watch, on the other hand, is a noble military order whose founding goes back 8,000 years to a period of famine and cold called the Long Night. Now during that period, some demonic forces called the Others emerged in the icy north of Westeros. Wars were fought and these demonic forces were defeated. A great wall of ice filled with magic was built to separate the icy northernmost parts of Westeros from the rest of the kingdoms, and a Night's Watch was formed to man the wall of ice and to guard against any invasion that may come from beyond the wall. Now, unlike the Unsullied, the men of the Night's Watch are not slaves, neither are they eunuchs. They still have their penises and their testicles intact, but they take a vow called the Black that prevents them from having sex. There are some technicalities as to the interpretation of the vow, whether it explicitly prevents them from having sex, but generally that is the accepted interpretation. But the vow does not just end at celibacy, it also prevents them from owning property and having a family. This is fast becoming interesting, isn't it? Because I don't know if you can think of any military in the real world that are structured like the Unsullied, where they are either eunuchs or forbidden from engaging in sexual activity. I took time to, do some research. We'll get into that very soon about real world examples of armies structured like the Night's Watch, and the Unsullied. But before that, let's take a look at the vows that the brave men of the Night's Watch, let's take a look at the vow that they took and the restrictions that those vows placed on their sexual lives. Right, so here are the vows. It goes like this: night gathers, and now my watch begins. And every person who comes in as a recruit into the Night's Watch, before they become sworn brothers of the Night's Watch, they must take this vow. Otherwise, there's no getting into the Night's Watch. So it goes like this: night gathers, and now my watch begins. It shall not end until my death. I shall take no wife, hold no lands, and father no children. I shall wear no crowns and win no glory. I shall live and die at my post. I am the sword in the darkness. I am the watcher on the walls. I am the fire that burns against the cold, the light that brings the dawn, and the horn that wakes the sleepers. I'm the shield that guards the realms of men. I pledge my life and honor to the Night's Watch for this night and all the nights to come. A very interesting and powerful vow that is the men of the Night's Watch take in order to become sworn brothers. So here we are with two of the most capable military forces in the entire Game of Thrones world, and the only other thing that they have in common aside their military prowess is their sexless lives. But exactly why are they made to not engage in sexual activity? And is it the reason why they are so powerful on the battlefield? Is it the reason why they are renowned as great soldiers? Is it the reason why they do so well as military men? I really wanted to know why, but before I did, I wanted to make sure that this concept of eunuch or celibate soldiers who become very powerful as a result of their celibacy or eunuch status is a concept that has roots in the real world, that is not just something that is in the fictional world of Game of Thrones. Because if there are no examples in real life, then pursuing answers to that question, becomes useless anyway, because it is not applicable in real life. So I did some research. I asked Google's Gemini, the AI, to give me examples of armies in the real world that are structured like the Night's Watch or the Unsullied. It gave me 4 examples, but since they are not the subject of the video, we will look at only 2, so that we can get to the fun part of discovering whether or not the celibate status of the Unsullied and the Night's Watch contributed to their power as military men. So like I said, Gemini gave me 4 examples, but we're going to consider 2 of them. We're going to consider the Knights Templars and an army called the Janissaries. So the Janissaries were an elite corps in the standing army of the Ottoman Empire from the 14th century to about 1826. They were highly respected for their discipline and their military prowess, and were considered as the first modern standing army in Europe. And if you guessed right, they were forbidden from having sex. The Knights Templars were established in 1119. It was a Catholic medieval military order that combined a monastic lifestyle with martial prowess, and their purpose was to protect holy sites like the Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem, and also to provide escort services for pilgrims who are pilgriming to the Holy Lands, aka Jerusalem, to go and see places of spiritual significance to themselves. These guys were very powerful people, and if you guessed right, they too were forbidden from having sex. So considering all that we've said so far, for me, examining things critically, one thing that has been present throughout that could explain the need for celibacy in the lives of these exceptional, brilliant military people is discipline and duty. We see it in the remarks that Krasny's Monarchlos makes concerning the Unsullied when he was doing a presentation to Daenerys Targaryen. We also see it in the contents of the vows of the Night's Watch, and we see it in the historical accounts of the Janissaries and the Knights Templars. I think that they not having sex made them more disciplined and freed them from the distractions that hinders their duty to military service. So here is a quote from George Washington that demonstrates the importance of discipline in the life of a soldier. So George Washington says that discipline is the soul of an army. It makes small numbers formidable. It procures success to the weak and esteem to all. It is not a surprise that he led the American forces to win the Revolution Wars, or whatever you guys call it. I'm not too sure. But George Washington was the captain of the American forces that won freedom for the people of America from colonial rule. And his philosophy for, a great army is discipline. He says that it procures strength and esteem to all. It makes small numbers formidable. So I think that in order to discipline was a very important virtue to cultivate, and most of the time you cannot be disciplined if there are distractions. And so the celibacy rule in the lives of the Janissaries, in the lives of the Knights Templar, in the lives of the Night's Watch and the Unsullied were to help make discipline a little bit more easier. Although one can equally argue that it takes more discipline to actually be celibate, which, I mean, if you're able to be celibate, of course, then you should be able to transfer that discipline onto the battlefield, right? So I think the celibacy was like a daily practice, a daily fight against your urges to do something, your daily fight against your urges to engage in sexual activity, which is one of the strongest motivators that any young man can have. So if you're able to overcome that and stay celibate, that level of discipline will translate into the battlefield. I think that is a plausible explanation for why they were made, celibate. Things like properties and family at home, wife, children, houses, material things that they possess sometimes becomes a barrier to military duty, because there are certain orders that the military will give to its people that maybe have to carry out, because, for example, if someone has children and wives, in the thick of the battle, they will probably be thinking, instead of laying down their all and giving their all for the battle and dying probably in the process, their self-preservation instincts will kick in because they have a family back home to take care of, and that kind of softens their resolves and kind of makes them drop their guard or panic or try to save themselves, and that weakens the entire military structure and makes them weak. So I think that the celibacy rule for the soldier armies was to free them from the hindrances that can get in the way of devoting themselves and carrying out their military duty at full length. Do you agree with me? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I hope that I did justice to the video. I actually was searching for modern examples of militaries that have some structure of celibacy, even if not full-blown celibacy, some rule, restricting sexual activities to some point. It turns out that it's a little bit non-existent in the modern world. I don't know if you have any examples of any standing army of any nation or any military group that, have certain kinds of restrictions for sexual activity. Please let me know in the comments. And most importantly, if you are a military person, let me know your thoughts about sex and the military, and having family and the military. When you're on the battlefield in, let's say, Afghanistan, do you think about your family back home, and does it impact your ability to do war on the battlefield? Alright people, thank you so much for watching. Please like the video, subscribe, and see you soon.